What happens when one of the most dangerous strikers in WWE history decides that your grand return to the company is the perfect moment to send a message? What happens when the Empress of Tomorrow chooses violence the second you step back through that curtain? And what happens when Tiffany Stratton, the center of the universe herself, becomes the target of an assault so vicious, so calculated, so absolutely brutal that it changes everything we thought we knew about the women's division? Because that's exactly what went down, and if you missed it, you missed one of the most shocking moments of the year. Asuka didn't wait for a contract signing. She didn't wait for a face-to-face promo. She didn't even wait for Tiffany to make it to the ring. The moment Tiffany Stratton returned to WWE television, Asuka was there, and what followed was absolute chaos. We're talking about an attack so fierce, so unrelenting, that even the most hardened WWE veterans were stunned. We're talking about a statement that echoed through every locker room, every commentary table, and every single fan watching at home or in that arena. So buckle up, because we're about to break down every single detail of this explosive encounter. We're going to explore why Asuka chose this moment, what it means for Tiffany's return, and how this one attack has completely rewritten the landscape of the women's division. This isn't just another beatdown. This is the beginning of something massive, something dangerous, and something that neither of these women may walk away from unscathed. Let's rewind for just a moment, because to truly understand the magnitude of what happened, we need to understand where Tiffany Stratton has been and what her return actually meant. Tiffany had been away from WWE programming for weeks, dealing with an injury that kept her out of action during some of the most critical moments in the women's division. And let's be real, the fans were feeling her absence. Whether you love her or you love to hate her, Tiffany Stratton is box office. She's got that larger-than-life personality, that undeniable charisma, and when she steps into a WWE ring, something special happens. Her confidence is off the charts, her in-ring ability speaks for itself, and she carries herself like she's already a multi-time champion even though she's still early in her WWE journey. The anticipation for her return had been building for weeks. Social media was buzzing. Fans were speculating about when she'd come back, who she'd target, and what kind of impact she'd make. Would she go after a championship immediately? Would she reignite an old rivalry? Would she align herself with someone unexpected? The possibilities were endless, and the excitement was palpable. WWE had been teasing her return with subtle hints, backstage vignettes showing her in physical therapy, short social media clips of her training, getting stronger, getting ready. The stage was set for a triumphant comeback, a moment where Tiffany would walk out to that WWE arena, soak in the reaction from the crowd, and remind everyone exactly why she's called the center of the universe. And then that music hit. That unmistakable entrance theme that signals Tiffany Stratton is in the building. The arena erupted, a mixture of cheers and boos because that's what Tiffany does, she elicits emotion. She's polarizing in the best possible way. The cameras caught her backstage, walking with that signature strut, that $1 million smile on her face, looking every bit like someone ready to reclaim her spot at the top of the division. She was dressed to compete, her gear pristine, her confidence radiating through the screen. You could feel the energy shifting. This was supposed to be her moment. This was supposed to be the night where Tiffany Stratton announced to the entire WWE Universe that she was back and better than ever. But wrestling, as we all know, rarely goes according to plan. Because before Tiffany could even make it halfway down that corridor, before she could step through the curtain and feel that arena atmosphere, before she could grab a microphone and cut one of those promos that gets everyone talking, Asuka appeared. And when I say appeared, I don't mean she casually walked into frame. I mean she exploded into the scene like a force of nature. There was no music, no announcement, no warning whatsoever. Just pure, unfiltered aggression from one of the most decorated and dangerous women in WWE history. The camera barely had time to adjust before Asuka was on her. A devastating kick to the midsection doubled Tiffany over before she even knew what hit her. And Asuka didn't stop. She didn't pause to trash talk. She didn't play to the cameras. This wasn't about theatrics. This was about violence. Asuka grabbed Tiffany by the hair and slammed her face first into the concrete wall backstage. The sound echoed through the monitors, a sickening thud that made everyone watching wince. Tiffany crumpled, clearly dazed, clearly not expecting this level of viciousness right out of the gate. But Asuka wasn't finished. Not even close. She pulled Tiffany back up and drove a series of rapid-fire strikes to her face and body, each one landing with precision, each one designed to inflict maximum damage. Asuka's striking ability is legendary, we all know that. She's knocked out some of the toughest competitors in WWE history with those lightning-quick kicks and devastating elbows. And she was unleashing everything in her arsenal on Tiffany, who was desperately trying to cover up, trying to create some distance, trying to mount any kind of defense. But there was no defense against this. Asuka was relentless, her face twisted into that manic expression that lets you know she's in a completely different zone, a zone where pain is the language and devastation is the message. The backstage crew tried to intervene. Referees rushed in, producers shouted, but Asuka shoved them aside like they were nothing. She grabbed a nearby equipment crate and hurled Tiffany into it, the crash reverberating through the backstage area. Tiffany collapsed onto the floor, holding her back, grimacing in pain, and for a moment it looked like maybe, just maybe, someone would be able to pull Asuka away and end this before it got even worse. But Asuka had other plans. She grabbed Tiffany by the arm and dragged her across the concrete floor, ignoring the screams, ignoring the pleas from officials, and positioned her near a stack of steel chairs. The implications were terrifying. Everyone watching knew what was coming next, and the dread was palpable. Asuka grabbed one of those chairs, raised it high above her head, and the entire WWE Universe held its breath. This was going too far. This was crossing a line. But Asuka didn't care about lines. She brought that chair down with sickening force, but at the last possible second, multiple officials threw themselves between Asuka and Tiffany, absorbing the blow, creating a human barrier to prevent further catastrophe. Security finally arrived in force, at least 8 or 9 personnel, and they swarmed Asuka, physically restraining her, pulling her away from the scene. And even then, even as they held her back, Asuka was screaming in Japanese, her eyes locked on Tiffany's crumpled form, her body still trying to break free and continue the assault. The intensity in her eyes was absolutely chilling. This wasn't a wrestler trying to make a statement for the cameras. This was someone genuinely consumed by rage, someone who wanted to hurt Tiffany Stratton in the most visceral way possible. Meanwhile, medical personnel rushed to Tiffany's side. She was conscious but clearly in tremendous pain, holding her ribs, her face already showing signs of swelling from those brutal strikes. The cameras captured every moment, the chaos, the concern on the faces of the medical staff, the shocked reactions from other superstars who had gathered nearby after hearing the commotion. This was supposed to be a celebration of Tiffany's return, and instead, it turned into a crime scene. The announcers at ringside were beside themselves trying to process what had just happened. You could hear the genuine shock in their voices as they tried to provide context, tried to make sense of this unprovoked attack. Because that's what everyone was asking. Why? Why did Asuka do this? What possible motivation could she have for ambushing Tiffany Stratton the moment she returned? These two hadn't been involved in any significant storyline together. There was no obvious bad blood between them. So what triggered this level of violence? As Tiffany was helped to her feet and escorted toward the trainer's room, the cameras stayed with her, capturing every painful step, every wince, every labored breath. Her return, the moment she had been working toward for weeks, was completely derailed in a matter of seconds. And you have to wonder what was going through her mind in that moment. The anger, the confusion, the sheer disbelief that her comeback was stolen from her in such brutal fashion. But here's where things get even more interesting, because as the show continued and the initial shock began to wear off, people started piecing together potential reasons for Asuka's attack. And the theories ranged from the strategic to the deeply personal. Let's start with the most obvious angle, championship positioning. Tiffany Stratton, before her injury, was being positioned as a major player in the women's championship picture. She had momentum, she had wins over credible opponents, and she was clearly on a trajectory toward title contention. Her return would naturally put her right back in that conversation, potentially at the front of the line given the sympathy and attention her absence created. Now, Asuka is a former champion herself, multiple times over across multiple companies. She's one of the most accomplished women in wrestling history. But lately, she hasn't been in the title picture. She's been floating, having solid matches but not really involved in the main event scene of the women's division. Could this attack be Asuka's way of forcibly inserting herself back into championship relevance? By taking out a rising star, by making such a huge statement, Asuka guarantees that everyone is talking about her. Management has to pay attention. The champion, whoever holds the title, now has to consider Asuka a legitimate threat because she just proved she's willing to do absolutely anything to get what she wants. In wrestling, sometimes the most effective way to get an opportunity is to create chaos, to make yourself impossible to ignore. And Asuka certainly accomplished that. But there might be more to it than just championship aspirations. There's a psychological element that we can't overlook. Asuka has been in WWE for years now, and she's had an incredible run, but the landscape has changed dramatically. New stars have emerged, younger talent is getting pushed, and veterans like Asuka sometimes find themselves having to fight harder for the same spotlight they once commanded effortlessly. Tiffany Stratton represents everything that might frustrate a veteran like Asuka. She's young, she's charismatic, she's being positioned as a future cornerstone of the division, and she's getting opportunities that took others years to earn. Is it possible that Asuka sees Tiffany as symbolic of a larger issue, the idea that the new generation is being handed opportunities without paying the same dues? That interpretation adds a fascinating layer to this attack. It transforms it from a simple ambush into a generational statement, a message from a proven legend to an up-and-coming star that says you haven't earned this spotlight yet, and I'm going to make you prove you deserve it. There's also the cultural element to consider, and this requires some sensitivity and understanding of Asuka's character. Throughout her career, Asuka has always carried herself with a specific kind of pride, a warrior mentality that demands respect through dominance. In her mind, respect isn't given, it's taken. It's earned through combat, through proving yourself against the absolute best. Tiffany's return was being treated like a coronation, like her mere presence was enough to shift the entire division. But from Asuka's perspective, Tiffany hasn't proven anything yet. She hasn't beaten Asuka. She hasn't gone through the wars that establish true credibility. So this attack could be Asuka's way of saying, if you want respect, if you want to be taken seriously, you're going to have to go through me first, and it's not going to be easy. Now, let's talk about the immediate aftermath and the reactions from around the WWE Universe. Social media absolutely exploded within minutes of this attack airing. Trending topics, thousands of tweets, Instagram posts, TikTok reactions, everyone had an opinion. Some fans were outraged, claiming Asuka went too far and that this kind of violence, especially targeting someone just returning from injury, was crossing a line. Others were thrilled, praising Asuka for bringing back that edge, that unpredictability that makes wrestling compelling. Because let's be honest, in an era where so much of wrestling can feel scripted and predictable, moments like this remind us why we love this business. When done right, wrestling can shock us, can make us feel genuine emotion, can create moments we'll be talking about for years. Wrestlers from both the current roster and alumni started chiming in as well. Some expressed concern for Tiffany's well-being, tweeting support and wishing her a speedy recovery. Others, particularly those who faced Asuka in the ring, warned Tiffany that this is just the beginning, that Asuka doesn't do anything halfway, and that if Tiffany wants to survive in this feud, she's going to have to match that intensity. The commentary team, during the remainder of the show, kept circling back to the attack, providing updates on Tiffany's condition, showing replays from different angles, and speculating about what would happen next. The official word from WWE medical staff was that Tiffany suffered contusions and bruising but thankfully no serious structural damage. However, out of an abundance of caution, she was being evaluated for a possible concussion given the impact of some of those strikes. The fact that she was even able to walk out under her own power was somewhat miraculous given the brutality of the assault. But here's what makes this whole situation even more compelling. Tiffany Stratton is not someone who backs down from a fight. Her entire persona is built around confidence, around being unbothered by adversity, around believing she's better than everyone else in that locker room. This attack, as devastating as it was, probably ignited something in Tiffany that WWE fans haven't fully seen yet. Because up until now, Tiffany has been dominant. She's been winning matches, looking good doing it, and riding a wave of momentum. But she hasn't really been tested in a true blood feud, a rivalry where the stakes are personal, where the animosity is real, and where both competitors are willing to sacrifice their bodies to prove a point. This feud with Asuka, whether Tiffany wanted it or not, is about to show us what she's really made of. And that brings us to the big question, what happens next? Because WWE now has an absolute powder keg on their hands, and the possibilities for where this story goes are endless. The most obvious next step is a match between these two. And not just any match, but something with stipulations that reflect the intensity of their rivalry. We could be looking at a street fight, a no disqualification match, maybe even a last woman standing match. These are the kinds of stipulations that allow both wrestlers to showcase their toughness, their creativity, and their willingness to push beyond normal limits. Can you imagine Asuka and Tiffany Stratton in a hardcore environment? The veteran with decades of experience in brutal matches against the young star trying to prove she belongs at that level? That's money, that's a pay-per-view quality match that fans would absolutely pay to see. But before we get to that match, there's the build. And this is where WWE has an opportunity to do something really special. Tiffany is going to want revenge, that much is certain. But how does she get it? Does she try to catch Asuka off guard the same way Asuka caught her? Does she cost Asuka matches, interfere in her business, make Asuka's life miserable until she gets her hands on her in an official capacity? Or does Tiffany take the high road, call Asuka out face to face, and demand a match where she can prove she's not just a victim but a legitimate threat? And what about Asuka's motivations moving forward? Is this just about Tiffany, or is this the beginning of Asuka going on an absolute tear through the women's division? Could we see her target other rising stars, other wrestlers she feels haven't earned their spot? That would position Asuka as a genuine menace, a top heel who believes she's the gatekeeper of the division and that anyone who wants to be considered elite has to go through her first. That's a role Asuka could absolutely excel in, and it would give multiple wrestlers meaningful feuds and storylines. There's also the championship element to consider. If WWE is smart, they'll weave this personal rivalry into the title picture. Imagine if both Asuka and Tiffany enter a #1 contenders match, forced to not only deal with each other but also with several other competitors, all while their hatred for each other threatens to derail their own championship aspirations. Or perhaps the champion gets involved, seeing this rivalry as an opportunity to weaken both potential challengers by letting them destroy each other first. The layers you can add to this story are virtually unlimited. From a character development standpoint, this feud is gold for both women. For Asuka, it re-establishes her as one of the most dangerous competitors in WWE, someone who operates by her own code and doesn't care about politics or playing by the rules. It reminds everyone why she held the longest undefeated streak in modern WWE history, why she's been a champion everywhere she's competed, and why underestimating her is a fatal mistake. For Tiffany, this is the trial by fire that could elevate her from promising talent to bona fide main event star. If she can survive this feud, if she can match Asuka's intensity and come out the other side with a victory, she'll have proven beyond any doubt that she belongs at the top of the women's division. This is the kind of feud that makes careers, the kind of story that fans remember and reference years down the line when discussing someone's legacy. Let's also talk about the wrestling itself, because when these two finally lock up in an actual match, we're going to see some incredible action. Asuka is one of the best in-ring performers on the planet, her striking is world-class, her submission game is deadly, and her psychology is off the charts. She knows how to work every style, from technical mat wrestling to high-flying spectacle to hard-hitting brawls. Tiffany, while younger and less experienced, is no slouch either. She's athletic, she's got great timing, and she's shown glimpses of real star quality in the ring. The contrast in styles, the veteran's cunning versus the young star's raw ability, creates a dynamic that should produce some fantastic matches. And let's be real, the promos in this feud are going to be must-see television. Asuka with her unpredictable energy and intimidating presence, cutting promos in a mixture of English and Japanese, exuding menace with every word. Tiffany with her Valley Girl persona hiding a genuinely tough competitor, firing back.